let me tell you this. The older you do get, the more rules are going to try to get you to follow.
The Harry Potter collectible card game is for 2 players and has some similar concepts to Magic the Gathering. The starter set comes with 2 41-card decks, though the deck building rules state that you should play with 60-card decks plus 1 starting witch or wizard. Also, you could have at most 4 copies of any card in your deck, except for lessened cards. To start, players place their starting characters face up on the table, shuffle their decks, and draw 7 cards. Players decide amongst themselves who goes first. The anatomy of a turn is as follows. First, you resolve any start of turn effects. Then, you must draw a card in your hand. If you have any creatures that deal damage, they deal damage at this point. Then, you may take up to 2 actions. After this, you resolve any end of turn effects. Players alternate taking turns in this fashion until one player's draw deck is empty. This is particularly interesting because whenever players take damage, they discard cards from their draw deck into their discard deck. The simplest action to take is to draw a card and add it to your hand. You're probably going to be doing this often early in the game, so you can build up your power. Another action you'll be taking early in the game often is to play lesson cards. These are similar to land in Magic the Gathering. They provide power for your spells and other cards. It's worth mentioning now that any cards that are printed lengthwise, like these lesson cards, stay in play on the table. Any cards printed with a portrait layout are used once and then discarded. This is probably a good point to go over the different types of spells that you could cast. First of all, there are potions cards. I find these are fairly straightforward. They'll probably either help you damage your opponent, or help you get cards back into your draw deck from your discard pile. Next, there are charms. These are also fairly straightforward and often deal with damaging your opponent or their creatures. There's the Care of Magical Creatures type. You need these to get creatures into play. Creatures are useful because they deal ongoing damage as long as your creatures are in play. Transfiguration cards are fairly situational, but they can have powerful effects, like making your opponent discard creatures or other cards. Quidditch cards are more powerful when they're played with other Quidditch cards, so if you're going to have any in your deck, you're probably going to want to make it a focus. Most other cards require some number or type of lesson cards to be played to be able to play the card. For instance, this card requires 5 lessons, at least one of which must be Transfiguration. This card requires 3, at least one of which must be Potions. These are spell cards. Once played, you resolve their effects immediately, and then discard the card. These are creature cards. Typically, they'll be dealing damage to your opponent at the start of each of your turns. Some creatures have more than 1 health. You'll have to have tokens, or otherwise a die, to keep track of how many hits they've taken. In this game, damage is cumulative on monsters, unlike in Magic. Item cards stay in play unless some effect makes the player discard them. Many items also provide lesson power. For instance, this book provides 1 Care of Magical Creatures lesson. Location cards have an effect on both players during their turns while in play. There can only be 1 location in play at a given time. If you play a new location, it replaces the current location. Quidditch matches have some sort of win condition that either player can satisfy. Once one of the players has satisfied the condition, they get the prize for the match. Similar to the locations, there can only be 1 match in play at any given time. However, they can't be replaced. Once a match is played, it must be satisfied before a new match can start. It's worth noting that whichever player plays the match, he has to use an action to do it, and it's harder for them to satisfy the conditions. As such, they need to make sure that their hand is tailored to win the match. For 2 actions, a player may bring in a new character card. These work just like the starting character, but they can be discarded by different effects. It's worth noting that only particular character cards can be used as a starting character. You can only use a card that has the Witch or Wizard keyword in the title. Another card that requires 2 actions to play is the Adventure card. You play these against your opponent. Similar to the Quidditch matches, your opponent must satisfy some sort of condition before the card can go away. They typically have some sort of negative effect. Once they do satisfy conditions, there's usually a reward to be had, though. Some cards have the Unique keyword. This means that only one can be in play on the table at any given time. This condition also must be satisfied for cards that have the same name. For instance, these are 2 different instances of Draco Malfoy, but they're both unique, and they're both Draco, so you can only have one in play at any given time.